Hey, Scott Spears along with you here, another edition of Scott Spears Now, and joining us this week, somebody who we've had on before, had a whole lot of fun with. He is a comic, writer, stand-up comedian, written for Ellen DeGeneres, Ryan Reynolds, Bill Maher, a whole litany of people, political activist as well, and baseball fan, we learned, by the Cracker Jacks on the desk and the Peanuts. So glad to have Mike Larsen back with us. And I should mention that Mike will be with us during this episode. And then we are going to bring Mary Ellen Withrow in and Matt Morgan in. And we're going to talk current events during our second episode this week. So we'll have a lot of fun with that.
Yeah.
There's never any lack of things to talk about these days, Mike.
No, there's not. It would be nice, wouldn't it, if there wasn't? Wouldn't it be nice to just have a week where you're like, nothing happened? We all just kind of reset.
Well, what do you think that does to society? Because during the Biden years, we did have a 4-year layoff where there were news cycles that were not politically dominated, and that seems to be gone in the last 100 days.
Yeah, it's funny you mention that because during the first Trump term, I felt like, this is just where we are now. It's just going to be 24/7. And part of that is just technology. A big part of that is technology. And then when Biden came in, I think there was a little bit of a breathing room where you went 4 or 5 days without wondering what the president was up to, for good or bad. I mean, people might say that was a criticism because he was hiding or feeble. I don't know, but I don't know that we need to know what the president's doing every day normally.
But it must drive ratings, or they wouldn't do it.
Well, sure, it certainly does in a certain thing, but let's be honest, that whole world, the Trump world, is all about Trump. It makes him happy. It's all just appeasing that personality, whatever. The parents who don't tell their kid no, it's, so I think a lot of it is just, that's what he does. And, when it is someone else, when we are in a post-Trump world, other people might try that, but they're not him.
Well, but it has to be showbiz, because there's always been this question, is everything he says for real? Now, most presidents, you would say, yeah, what they're saying, 99% of the time, they plan on doing. But like this week, reopening Alcatraz. Now, it's not going to happen.
But he meant it.
But did he?
Oh, yes. Oh, he meant it. And you see, they said the local channel in that part of Florida had just shown Escape from Alcatraz the night before, which is perfect. Yes, he means it. Now, whether or not the enablers around him who pretend to agree with him believe it, I don't think Marco Rubio believes it, but I think he does.
Really? Because the idea is, with things like deportations, with things like tariffs, they happen. He says them, they happen, they're on, they're off, they're all over the place, but they happen. I don't think there will ever be any money, any construction, any prisoners ever in Alcatraz. It reminds me of the...
No, because I don't know, have you ever been to Alcatraz?
I have not been to Alcatraz.
Okay, I grew up in San Francisco and have done the tour, but it was always a thing. Right. Everyone knew Alcatraz. I remember as a kid when the Native Americans took it over, we used to go over and watch them with binoculars. Alcatraz is a tiny little island with no running water and no sewage. All right, the reason they closed it down was because we finally reached an era, even in the 60s, where they're like, you can't just dump the sewage in the bay, So no, it is not going to happen. But does that matter to him? Because Donald Trump doesn't make jokes. We don't ever see him laugh at himself or have a good-natured chuckle about something. He says whatever comes in his brain, and some of it, people are able to say, we can work that. We can, in theory, deport everybody or send them to Libya. in theory. And then the things that he says that are just ridiculous, like drinking bleach or building up Alcatraz, they kind of nod and hope he moves on to something else, I think.
Well, this is a nice segue, because the last time you were on, we were talking about a guy that you worked for, Bill Maher, Real Time with Bill Maher, and that was the week that Bill was going to go to the White House. And Bill went to the White House, and boy, this got more news than Bill Maher has gotten in a long time. He comes back on his show, and I did watch the little monologue. It's on YouTube if people want to watch it. And he explains that the Trump that he met was not the Trump that we see. Even to the degree where he said, Bill says, why aren't you this guy? He says he laughs. They says he takes criticism. Bill said he told him he lost the 2020 election. He did not back off of it. He said he was a good host. It's a different man. And Bill Maher took a lot of heat for that.
Yeah, because Bill Maher is... I called it, right? I was here right before,
right,
and I said, Bill's going to go, and when he comes back, he is going to present himself as the champion of free speech, the listen to both sides guy, and that's what he does. I tell you, Bill has no political philosophy. Bill is a broadcaster. Bill's drive in life is to stay on the air, and he has done it great. I mean, he has a show on HBO for 20 years. That's amazing. He will go down in broadcast history with those legendary hosts that had shows forever. But that's who Bill is. I have. It's been curious to see what the other people who still work for Bill, what their reaction to that was. I don't know that it has been much. I guess they know what you're dealing with. But that was one of the things that surprised me when I first went to work there, that first week. And I had gone, after had been a television writer for many years, went to D.C. to work for a member of Congress, and then Bill's show hired me from the congressional job. And so Bill, in his head, was thinking I'm the political guy. The comedy stuff, I think, was maybe back of mind for him. And one of the first thing that struck me was how little Bill kind of knows about politics, but also you and I were politics nerds, right? Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what I expected. I expected he was going to be a guy like, in McKinley's first term, he did such a, that's not Bill at all. Bill is a broadcaster, and he could have been, if his career took him in the route of doing shows about gardening, he would have been doing gardening.
It's interesting you say this, though, because the people that I talk to don't really see Bill Maher as a great broadcaster. They see him as somebody who's had longevity, but he's had it in very unique niches. He had Comedy Central is where Politically Incorrect started. That did not have a huge audience.
I think it began on ABC, or did it start? It moved to ABC.
Moved to ABC. Right. Ted Koppel hated it. He would never plug it after Nightline. It didn't survive on ABC. It went away. Then he got the show on HBO. HBO, you don't have to have big ratings to survive on HBO.
Right. You need a niche of wealthier viewers,
And I think that's what Bill Maher has always had. I don't think he'll be seen as Johnny Carson or Jay Leno or David Letterman. I think he'll be seen as a guy who wanted to be on television, who was able to maintain, because Bill Maher is never the Emmy winner. He's never the host of the Oscars. He's never...
Right.
He's not that.
No. Although they did win an Emmy. They did win one. I was nominated when I was there, and then the following year, I think when Jon Stewart left The Daily Show, suddenly the awards were open to everyone again.
The awards were open.
But some of those people, I do see him in a line of like the personality types. Larry King, Scarborough, whatever. People who do have these niches and have had longevity. I think he is as good as any of them as a broadcaster. And isn't the measure of doing that longevity? I don't know what else the measure is. You're always going to have people love you and hate you, but HBO, it has lost some of its luster, but for most of Bill's run, HBO was a very coveted place to do a show. They were running it, when they also had The Sopranos and all that. So, Bill has real value for them.
I'm just interested in this whole Trump thing because he comes back from that. He gives the speech. Everybody thinks he's pro-Trump. He has Steve Bannon on as a guest. But then all of a sudden he gets such a backlash from it. Clearly he misjudged that one. And now his guests have really liberaled up in the last few weeks. And he does still criticize Trump quite a bit.
Right.
And every week he almost seems... This is the thing... I can see him now personally annoyed, not political philosophy, but because he did get beat up so much over this. I think he doesn't like that his broadcasting instinct might have been off here.
I have to disagree with you, Scott. I think because we are talking about Bill Maher right now, he won. And I think that's the way he sees it. Yes, he has a fragile ego and won't like the things. Like, I don't think he liked at all what Larry David said about him because he sees Larry David as a hero. And in our, world, Larry David is a hero. So there were specific things, but the whole, it was, last time I was here, we were talking about whether or not the Cory Booker speech was a stunt. This was a stunt that is all part of showbiz. You do stunts that seems to have worked pretty darn well for him. People are talking about him.
I guess the end on this subject, what's fascinated me, I have seen people, and I don't watch his show regularly,
right,
but I have seen people on since his little panel part of the show, where they're talking just about how Trump is fooling people, how he'll meet with people and seem very gracious. And they're not even talking about Bill. Bill will bring that up again. He'll say, listen, I went there. I had to go there. And it almost seems as if he is bothered by this whole thing. And I don't think he's that good an actor.
Yeah, I don't think he is. I think, Tulsi Gabbard was... charmed by Bashar al-Assad, said that he was really, in person, he's actually a really nice person. This person who launches chemical attacks on his own people. So, yeah, I don't doubt, and remember who Bill didn't just go. He chose to go with Kid Rock. All right, so... it was all a gimmick to begin with, and Bill is doing what he does. This is what he does, and his show will last a few more years because of it, but, look, when I worked on the show, he gave, was it when I was there? Yeah. He made a big deal about writing $1 million personal check to a PAC supporting Obama for re-election, all right? And I remember being in the room during those discussions, and I remember at the time thinking, he could care less that it's Obama. He is riding a train. And he, there's things he likes about him, whatever, a politician, that's fine. But it never felt like someone who, they need to do this because they believe in something.
Yeah, I don't think he has a philosophy, but I think he seems like a particularly fragile person.
Oh, sure.
I don't think if you hit Johnny Carson or Letterman, I think they appreciated it because they liked the fight on the air.
Yes.
I don't think he likes the fight. I think he likes to be in control. I think he likes to be seen a certain way.
Yeah, I guess. But he has very good instincts for what's good television,
Now, does somebody like Ellen DeGeneres, in your opinion, who you've been around, Ryan Reynolds, who you've been around, do they have the instincts that Bill Maher has?
Oh, I think it's very different instincts. Ryan's an actor. Ryan has always been an actor. He was a child actor. he, for all of his silliness and good natured when I knew him as a very young actor, a guy in his early 20s, he was studying well. You know, he was going to acting classes regularly and working with people and becoming better and learning, staying in shape so he could do action stuff or whatever. So he's a guy who really puts a lot of work into it. So yeah, I think it is very different. Bill, I would put Bill more in the lines of, just kind of Geraldo Rivera would be a good
Somebody
example.
who stayed around.
Geraldo with a couple of breaks differently here or there. Had there been something in Al Capone's tomb, maybe he would still have a show, right?
Maybe he would. Maybe he would. And I think he's still on one of those news channels popping
He's
up.
still, yeah, you still see him.
He's still around.
Yeah.
He's still doing it. Now, when we did the radio show, we talked about you working for Ellen and Bill Maher and more in depth. But when I say the name, give me one word that pops in your mind when you hear these names. Ellen DeGeneres.
Funny. I know that seems too simple, but that was my relationship with Ellen. She cracked me up.
Bill Maher.
Strategic.
Ryan Reynolds.
Nice.
Jay Leno.
A joke writer. Yeah.
Who else do you put in that list of people you've worked for that
had real strong
strong?
Well,
yeah.
Drew Carey. Could be almost all of those things. Just a sweet, generous, empathetic guy.
Too nice to be in Hollywood?
Evidently not.
He made it.
Drew's
He's doing okay.
great. Drew is backing up the Brinks truck every day. He's doing great.
Well, it's interesting.
No, because Drew lived a life. He had some serious, mental health issues as a young man and had messed up family stuff. So he was never he's not anyone's patsy. I mean, he's very empathetic and very kind, but you never get the sense that you could take advantage of him or push him around.
Do you have to be... Is there anybody who can be a truly nice person, not be strategic, not be insecure, and make it big?
Oh, sure. Well, but strategic's not a bad thing, right? I mean, in all of our careers, we need to be strategic, whether you have a plumbing company or an actor. And certainly in the arts, it is a constant hustle. It really is a hustle. And I was just talking to someone just yesterday, a young actor at Ohio State who just graduated. And I said, the reason you go to these LA or New York, the work's there, but mostly it's the opportunities you don't know. If you're good, one of these days you'll get an opportunity and you'll knock it out of the park. All right, and that's kind of what you're doing, and you're going to have starts and stops, and maybe it's on your second audition, and maybe it's on your 9,000th audition. But if you're good, you have to believe that. So the good people who do that struggle, and they never lose sight of the struggle. They understand that it was a struggle, and there was a little bit of there, but for fortune, whatever. But so, and then there are those people in any line of work who have a little bit of success and think it's because of them, because they are somehow genetically superior to other people. And like I say, I think that's it. It could be in any line.
Well, I guess more what I was speaking about. You said something during one of those interviews, and I think I hope I have this right, that you credited it to Ellen, was that when your name is on a show, if the jokes aren't funny, you're not going to be a nice person.
Oh, hell yeah.
But is there anybody who can take that, who can have a strong enough personal ego to say, it's maybe not that funny, I'm going to try my best here, but I'm self-aware enough to know that I can come back next week and hopefully it'll be funny. I mean, you can't do that week after week after
right,
week.
It's a show.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know that you get to that point. You've got to be in comedy. You really have to have that gene of saying this is funny and this isn't. I don't care how many other people are telling me differently. I believe this. Now, in in more of an ensemble show. Like Drew Carey, even though it was the Drew Carey show, he had this amazing ensemble of comedy performers. And Drew, kind of like Jerry Seinfeld, his supporting cast was funnier than he was. He was almost the straight man. You know, Ray Romano did that too. It was kind of the straight man. So in those cases, it's a little easier to throw a joke to another character, or no, in Drew's case, that, you know, Ryan Stiles will save my butt. For things like both Ellen and Whoopi, both still had strong supporting casts, but the show was so much about them that I think that the stakes are just higher.
I'll tell you why this came up.
Yeah.
I heard you say that about Ellen, and then I recently saw a writer who wrote, I think it was for Golden Girls, or one of those shows, who wrote for Betty White. And he said that he went up to her, the showrunner was gone that week, he was the writer, he was acting as showrunner, and they had 2 ways to go on a joke. And he went to Betty White and he said, Betty, here are the 2 ways we can go, which way do you want to go? And she said, oh, that's your job, you're the writer.
That's
so
awesome.
Now that sounds like Betty White was completely secure in whatever they gave her.
And Betty White could make anything funny.
Well, see, that's
Betty
it.
would be like, give me the phone book. I'll make it funny.
See, I think that's why
and
she
again was surrounded by, oh my God, that comedy
Great
talent
cast.
in Golden Girls.
Yeah, you know, that's the funny thing. People say, well, why would people watch a show about 4 old women? Look at the writing and the show actresses.
All of them had, you know, 20, 30 years of experience making people laugh in every possible form, you know. Yeah. You have a B. Arthur photo on your wall here. I know.
First person I ever interviewed.
Yeah, really?
B.
That's
Arthur,
awesome.
yes.
That's awesome.
But,
I just noticed that.
Yeah, but apparently Betty didn't care. You make the decision, give it to me, and I'm going to deliver it.
Yes, I am assuming that he gave her 2 good options, though. Betty White was around a long time. If neither of them were good, you know, I think it was probably a case. But that's great. I never worked with Betty White. I'd been in a big room with lots of people where Betty White was in it, and I kind of, oh my God, that's Betty White. But I have never heard anything different about Betty White, that she is just a joy to work with. You know who else is that way? Talk about a singular comedy talent is Lily Tomlin.
A lot of people say that, yeah.
A very good friend of mine is Lily's stand-in on Grace and Frankie. Was that the show?
I think so,
that's
yeah.
what it was called.
We can't find
Frankie
that.
and Grace, maybe? I don't know. Frankie and Grace, I think. And said, you know, Lily, who is just this, you know, I mean, her stand-up was so brilliant. It is just very easy to get along with, but you know, knows funny. So if you give her something that she doesn't find funny, she's going to say, no, go beat that joke. And that is the job of a comedy writer. It is normal. You don't take it personal at all if someone says no. And then you go huddle up and you come up with another joke. Often you've already done them in advance, so you have them stored. But yeah, I'd heard that she was. And I have... This sounds so, I mean, can't get any cornier than this, but the song "There's No People Like Show People," and I totally believe that. I mean, there are jerks and everything, but man, talk about people who, at least the people that I would hang out with, would do anything for you, because every one of them is living a crazy dream that they had in Marion, Ohio, or me, little San Bruno, this little, you know, airport town, or this stupid dream that you had no reason to believe was going to come true. And most of the people I come across always hung on to that. And then, you know, some don't. And unfortunately, those are the ones people use as an example of you know, what show business is. And it's like, I for the most part, that wasn't my experience.
You know, is show business now politics? Because movies are released and they do well, but everybody knows what's going on politically. People are watching the news. If you look at most people's social media feeds, there's news in it. Their algorithms are filled with it. You know, it wasn't always that way.
No, and in fact, my whole television career, for the most part, because it was network television, politics wasn't allowed. They didn't want politics. They didn't want product references. They didn't want two things. One, they didn't want to alienate people. But two, they didn't want to date the show. So if you make a joke about who's president, they're like, we want to run this in syndication for 20 years. No one's going to get a Bill Clinton joke, you know. So even though that was my background and I wanted to bring politics to it, and you know, it really wasn't allowed until shows like Veep, and you know, I mean, Veep was a big game changer for showing how politics could be political and funny, and not, you know, not necessarily picking a side. You know,
it is kind of interesting though, for the huge hit that All in the Family was. Yeah. It does not play well in repeats or play as often as some other shows.
Yeah.
But shows of the 80s, like The Cosby Show, well, before he got into trouble.
I don't think The Cosby Show
now
does
it's,
well.
But Golden Girls.
Golden Girls, yes.
Golden Girls still, Roseanne plays like $1 million. They still play well.
Yeah, yeah. And even shows of the same era as All in the Family, but I think part of it, and maybe, and the networks are probably right, that it is dated because they argue about Nixon and the Vietnam War. The thing that made it so good then now just makes it feel really old. I haven't seen it in years, but boy, what a great show that was. Whereas other shows of the same era, you know, other great shows, Taxi, Barney Miller, I don't know if they're playing anywhere, but they probably hold up better because they're
Mary Tyler Moore has held up.
Mary Tyler Moore, yeah, another great show, the Dick Van Dyke Show. I mean, those are just so... really great shows. But no, you're right. All in the Family, you know, it was very... But even back then, All in the Family would not have been All in the Family were it not for, you know, Norman Lear, you know, getting his you know, the pilot did so well that instead of him doing what most people do is say, what do I have to do to make sure I don't lose my job? He was the opposite. I'm walking unless we do it my way, and we're going to talk politics and religion, and so, you know.
Can you have a show, does the actor make the joke funny, or can the joke make the actor funny?
Oh, both. The best situation in the world is when you craft a really great joke and then get to go put it in the mouth of a skilled comedy performer like Ryan Reynolds or you know, Drew Carey, or you know, when you have someone who's like, wow, that joke was funny when I said it in the room. That's how we know it's funny. But then when the comedy professional, you know, yeah, both. And a good actor, you know, someone like Lily Tomlin, who just does so many quirky little physical things. You know, she'll just sit in her chair, and the way she'll toss her hair will add 10 points to the joke, you know. So, yeah, to see it come alive for a character. And, of course, when I was, the shows I was working on, they were multicam sitcoms shot in front of an audience. So that's the big difference, right? If you do it and the 400 people in the audience laugh and cheer, you know, even better.
That's a funny joke. Yeah. And if they don't laugh, when you retape
then you
it, that
give them another joke.
Yeah, you come up with another joke.
And that's what you do. That's it. You cut, and the writers huddle and say, oh, no, that joke, how about this, how about this, how about this? Yeah, let's go pitch that to the star.
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes you would have people like Drew Carey or, you know, Whoopi, who were, you know, who you'd pitch a joke, and even if they didn't like it, they'd say, no, oh, whoa, wait, I got it. And then we'd run it back, and they would have rewritten it in their tongue that is like, perfect, you know. So
perfect for them.
Right.
It's been great chatting with Mike Larsen on this one-on-one episode, but we are going to bring Dick Tobin in, so we're going to have some piano music in the background. We've had that the last few weeks. Mary Ellen's coming in, Matt's coming in, and we're going to talk current events on the other episode this week. For this episode, Scott Spears heading for the dugout.